Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The homeowners association where I lived mostly kept to themselves. They'd send the occasional reminder about lawn height or holiday decorations, but nothing too crazy. We all had a rhythm going. Trash day was Tuesday. Most of us rolled our bins to the curb Monday night after dinner. The truck usually came through around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. Simple, easy. Nobody complained. Then the email came. I was having coffee when I saw it pop up on my phone. The subject line said, "Important reminder, trash bin placement." I opened it and saw 3 paragraphs of text explaining what we were apparently doing wrong. The key sentence was in bold. All trash bins must be placed curbside no earlier and no later than 7 a.m. on pickup day. I read it twice. No earlier and no later than 7. That was new. I've been putting my bin out the night before since I moved in. Everyone on my street did the same thing. I looked out my window. My neighbor from across the street had his bin already sitting at the curb. 2 houses down, same thing. We'd all been doing it this way forever. Someone clearly complained. That was the only explanation. Somebody didn't like seeing bins out overnight and tattled to the association. Now we all had to deal with this nonsense. I texted my neighbor from across the street. He was retired and usually up early anyway. I asked him if he saw the email. He said yeah and wanted to know what it was about. I told him I had no idea and guessed someone didn't like bins out at night. He mentioned he'd been doing it that way for 15 years and it had never been a problem. I agreed but said it was a problem now apparently. I figured I'd just follow the rule. I didn't need the association breathing down my neck over a trash bin. The last thing I wanted was a violation notice and a $50 fine for something this stupid. So I set an alarm on my phone for 6:55 a.m. Tuesday morning it went off. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on shoes, and wheeled the bin down to the curb at exactly 7. I checked my watch to make sure. 7 on the dot. I stood there for a second looking up and down the street. Not a single other bin was out yet. Everyone else was still asleep, probably ignoring the email like they had common sense. But I was following the rules. The truck didn't come until 8:15 that morning. I was already at work by then, but I knew it got picked up because the bin was empty when I got home. Next Tuesday, same thing. Alarm at 6:55. Bin out at 7. I felt ridiculous standing there in my pajamas at the curb like I was performing some kind of ritual, but whatever. Rules are rules. This time I saw one other bin out on the street. My neighbor 2 doors down had hers out too. She waved at me from her driveway. I waved back. At least I wasn't the only one playing along. The following week I did it again. Alarm. Bin 7 a.m. I was getting used to the routine even though it was annoying. But that Tuesday, the truck came early. I heard it rumbling down the street at 6:35 while I was still getting dressed. I looked out the window and watched it pass right by my house. My bin wasn't out yet. I was following the rule. I missed pickup. I ran outside in my socks and tried to flag the truck down, but it was already halfway down the block. The driver didn't see me. I stood there on my lawn staring at my full bin sitting in the garage. So did 3 other houses on my street. I saw their bins still sitting full on Wednesday morning. My neighbor from across the street was one of them. The woman 2 doors down was another. I texted him and asked if he missed pickup too. He confirmed he did because the truck came at 6:30. I pointed out that the email said 7. He said he knew and that he was following the stupid rule. I asked what happened now. He said the bin would stay full all week, he guessed. I texted the woman 2 doors down too. She was just as frustrated. She said she'd set her alarm and everything, but the truck came too early. She asked if I was going to call the association. I told her I'd think about it, and it did. My bin sat there, lid barely closing because it was stuffed. The heat that week hit the high 80s. By Thursday, the smell was unbelievable. I had to hold my breath walking to my car. The flies were everywhere. My neighbor's bin looked even worse. I could see garbage bags stacked on top because he'd run out of room. I started getting texts from other neighbors asking what was going on. One guy asked if the trash company went on strike. I explained the new rule and how the truck came early. He said that was insane. By Friday, you could smell the bins from the end of the block. My neighbor from across the street started leaving his garage door closed because the smell was seeping in. I did the same. Friday afternoon, someone knocked on my door. It was my neighbor from 2 houses down. She looked tired and annoyed. She said this was ridiculous. I agreed and mentioned it smelled like a dumpster out here. She told me she called the association and they said we should have had our bins out earlier if the truck was coming early. I pointed out that the email said 7. She said she told them that, but they claimed 7 was the guideline and we were responsible for making sure we didn't miss pickup. I asked if they were serious. She nodded and said the person on the phone acted like it was our fault for not predicting when the truck would show up. I said that made no sense. She agreed and told me she was writing an email to the board and suggested I should too. I said I would. She mentioned a few other people on the street were doing the same. I sat down that night and typed out a message explaining the situation. The rule they'd sent out was impossible to follow when the truck didn't stick to a schedule. Either they needed to tell the company to come after 7 or they needed to change the rule. I sent it off and didn't expect much. But apparently I wasn't the only one who complained. I found out later that the board got over 20 emails that weekend. People were livid. One guy even sent pictures of his overflowing bin with maggots crawling on it. The next HOA email came out Monday evening. I opened it expecting another lecture. Instead, it was short. 1 paragraph. It said that after reviewing feedback from homeowners, the board had decided to update the trash bin policy. Bins could now be placed curbside the night before or early morning on pickup day. No mention of the 7 a.m. rule. No apology, just a quiet reversal. I showed my neighbor the email the next time I saw him outside. I told him I guessed they figured it out. He said it only took a week of rotting garbage for them to see reason. He mentioned he saw the trash truck driver that morning and asked him about the schedule. The driver said the company never got any instructions about a 7 a.m. rule. He said they just drive their route and pick up whatever bins are out. So the whole thing was pointless from the start. I asked if he was putting his bin out tonight. He said yep, and that he wasn't dealing with that alarm anymore. I said same here. I deleted the alarm from my phone that night. Tuesday morning I slept in like a normal person. When I left for work, the truck had already come through. My bin was empty. My neighbor's bin was empty. Everything was back to normal. The bins went out the night before like always. Nobody complained. The association never sent another email about it. Whoever had the problem in the first place either gave up or moved. I didn't care which. My trash got picked up on time and I didn't have to wake up early for no reason. That was good enough for me. My son is 6 months old now. He's my first baby. And yeah, maybe I'm a little protective, but I don't think that's unreasonable. He's been having a rough week with teething, barely sleeping, crying more than usual. Any parent would understand. My sister got engaged about 3 months ago. The whole thing happened fast. She'd been dating this guy for maybe 3 months total before he proposed. I've met him a handful of times at family dinners and stuff. He seems okay, I guess. A little loud, a little too comfortable making jokes at other people's expense, but I figured that was just his personality. My sister seemed happy, so I kept my mouth shut. Yesterday was supposed to be a nice, relaxed family barbecue at my parents' house. My husband couldn't make it because of work, so it was just me and the baby. I was looking forward to it. Some burgers, some sunshine, catching up with everyone. Simple. I got there around 2 in the afternoon. The baby had just woken up from a nap in the car, and he was already fussing. I could tell it was going to be one of those days where nothing would make him fully happy. I took him out of the car seat and just held him close, rocking him a little, while I walked into the backyard. Everyone was already there. My parents were at the grill, my aunt and uncle were sitting at the picnic table, and my sister was near the cooler with her fiancé. He had a beer in his hand, and from the way he was talking, loud and animated, I could tell it wasn't his first one. I said hi to everyone and found a spot in the shade to sit with the baby. He was still fussy, squirming in my arms, making those little whimpering sounds that usually mean he's about to full-on cry. I was trying to calm him down, bouncing him gently, when my sister's fiancé walked over. He had this big grin on his face, swaying just a little bit. He reached his hands out toward the baby. I asked him politely not to touch my son and explained that he'd been really fussy all day. He laughed. Like, he laughed out loud. He told me I was being way too overprotective and that babies cry all the time. He said I needed to toughen my son up. I just stared at him. I wasn't even sure how to respond to that. Toughen him up? He's 6 months old. Before I could say anything else, he reached out again, this time trying to grab the baby right out of my arms. I stepped back, pulling my son closer to my chest. I told him no again, more directly this time. He kept going, telling me to stop being so paranoid. He said babies are easy and that I was just making everything worse by babying my son all the time. He was still smiling, still acting like this was all some big joke. But I wasn't laughing. Neither was anyone else really. A few people were watching now, and I could see the uncomfortable expressions on their faces. My mom looked over from the grill. My aunt was pretending to look at her phone. My dad cleared his throat but didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. My sister was standing a few feet away, sipping her drink, staring at the ground. She didn't step in. She didn't say a word. I turned and walked away. I went inside the house, into the living room, and just sat there with the baby until he finally calmed down. I stayed inside for a while. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to get through the day. Around 4:30, my mom came inside and asked if I was okay. She sat down next to me and put her hand on my shoulder. She said she saw what happened and that she was sorry. I asked her why nobody said anything. She sighed and said she didn't know. She said sometimes people freeze up when things get awkward. I told her it wasn't about awkwardness. It was about respect. She nodded and said she understood. She said she'd talk to my sister about it. I told her not to bother. I said I'd handle it myself. When the barbecue was winding down and people were starting to leave, I pulled my sister aside. I told her I needed to talk to her about something. She looked annoyed already and asked me what I wanted. I explained that her fiancé couldn't hold my baby anymore. Not at my house, not at family events. I told her I didn't trust him. Her face went red. She asked if I was serious. I said yes. I reminded her that he was drunk, that he ignored me when I told him not to touch the baby, and that he tried to grab him anyway. I said that wasn't okay. She fired back, saying I was completely overreacting. She claimed he was just joking around and accused me of trying to control people. I told her I wasn't trying to control anyone. I explained that I was trying to protect my son. I said if someone can't respect a simple boundary, they don't get access to my kid. She crossed her arms and shook her head. She said I was making a big deal out of nothing. She said her fiancé was just trying to be friendly and that I was being rude. I asked her if she even heard what I said earlier. I asked if she saw him try to grab the baby after I told him not to. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. She said babies get passed around all the time at family events and that I needed to relax. I felt my chest tighten. I told her this wasn't about passing babies around. This was about someone ignoring a clear boundary. She called me ridiculous. She said I was being paranoid and dramatic, just like her fiancé had said. That stung. She was taking his side. Her fiancé of 3 months over me, her sister. I stayed calm. I told her I wasn't asking her to break up with him or anything. I just wanted her to respect my boundary as a mother. I repeated that he didn't get to hold my baby. That was it. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. She told me fine, but said not to expect her to come around if I was going to act like this. She said she wouldn't bring him to my house anymore if I was going to treat him like a criminal. I told her that was her choice. She walked away. Didn't even say goodbye. Just grabbed her fiancé and left. I stood there for a minute feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. My mom came over and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but I wasn't. I packed up the baby and left. I texted my husband on the way home and told him what happened. He called me right away. He said I did the right thing. He said he would have done the same thing if he'd been there. He said my sister's fiancé was out of line and that I had every right to set that boundary. Hearing him say that made me feel a little better. I haven't heard from my sister since. No text, no call, nothing. My mom texted me this morning asking if I was okay. She said my sister was upset but that she understood why I did what I did. She said she hoped we could work things out eventually. I told her I hoped so too, but that I wasn't going to apologize for protecting my son. Part of me feels bad, like maybe I should have just let it go. But the other part of me knows I did the right thing. I'm not overreacting. I'm not being paranoid. I'm being a mom. And if that makes me the bad guy in her eyes, then so be it. My son's safety comes first. Always. My older brother and I were just trying to enjoy a quiet Saturday. He was reading a book under the tree while I was tossing a ball around. Our yard isn't huge, but it's ours, and we've always felt safe there. That peace got shattered when we heard this loud buzzing sound coming from above. A drone appeared over our fence, hovering maybe 10 feet in the air. At first, I thought it was kinda cool. I'd seen drones before, but never one flying this close. My brother looked up from his book and watched it for a second before going back to reading. The drone circled around our yard, dipping lower and lower each time it passed. Then it started getting weird. The drone would zoom straight toward my brother, stop just a few feet from his head, and then pull back. It happened once, then twice, then 3 times. My brother put his book down and stood up, clearly annoyed. My brother yelled out to whoever was controlling the thing to knock us off. The drone pulled back for a moment, but then it came right back, even more aggressive than before. It was diving at him now, getting closer each time. I could see my brother starting to get genuinely worried. He wasn't just annoyed anymore. He was backing away, trying to get some distance from this thing that kept chasing him around our own yard. I ran inside to get Dad. He was in the kitchen making lunch when I burst through the door and told him what was happening. He dropped what he was doing and followed me outside. By the time we got back to the yard, the situation had gotten worse. The drone was hovering right at my brother's eye level, maybe 2 feet from his face. My brother had his hands up, trying to swat it away without actually touching it. Dad immediately started yelling for someone to get that thing out of our yard right now. Nobody answered. The drone just kept buzzing around my brother like an angry wasp. Dad looked around trying to figure out where the operator was. That's when we saw him. A kid, maybe 13 or 14, standing in the yard next door with a controller in his hands. He had this smirk on his face like he thought the whole thing was hilarious. Dad shouted at the kid that he needed to land that drone and take it home because he was harassing his son. The kid didn't say anything. He just kept flying the drone, making it dart back and forth in front of my brother's face. My dad started walking toward the fence, but before he could get there, everything went horribly wrong. The drone made one more aggressive dive toward my brother. This time my brother tried to duck, but he wasn't fast enough. The drone caught his arm, and the blade sliced right through his skin. Blood started pouring down his forearm immediately. My brother grabbed his arm and fell to his knees, and I could see the gash was deep. I've never seen my dad move so fast. He ran to my brother while I stood there frozen, watching blood drip onto the grass. My brother was trying to stay calm, but I could tell he was in serious pain. The cut ran from his elbow almost to his wrist, and it wouldn't stop bleeding. Dad told me to go get towels right away. I ran inside and grabbed every towel I could find. When I got back, Dad had already taken off his shirt and was using it to apply pressure to the wound. The drone was still hovering nearby, and I could hear the kid next door laughing. Actually laughing. That's when Dad snapped. He told me to keep pressure on my brother's arm, and then he grabbed one of our patio chairs. Before I could even process what was happening, he hurled that chair straight at the drone. It connected with a satisfying crunch, and the drone dropped like a rock, smashing into pieces on our lawn. The laughing stopped immediately. Dad didn't even look at the wreckage. He just scooped up my brother and told me to get in the car. We rushed to the hospital with towels wrapped around my brother's arm, trying to stop the bleeding. The whole drive there, Dad kept apologizing to my brother, telling him everything would be okay. The emergency room staff got my brother into a room right away. The cut required 23 stitches. 23, the doctor said if it had been any deeper, it could have hit a major vein or caused permanent nerve damage. My brother would have to wear a bandage for weeks and go through physical therapy to make sure his arm healed properly. We got home late that evening, exhausted and still shaken up. My brother was okay, but his arm was wrapped in thick bandages and he was on pain medication. We'd barely walked through the door when we heard loud knocking. Dad opened it to find two police officers standing on our porch. One of the officers explained that they had received a report about destroyed property. Someone claimed that a drone had been smashed with a chair. Dad didn't even hesitate. He told them to wait right there and went to check our doorbell camera. We'd installed it a few months earlier for security, but we never thought we'd need it for something like this. Dad pulled up the footage on his phone and showed it to the officers. The video showed everything. The drone harassing my brother trying to get away from it, the kid laughing in the background, the moment the blades cut into my brother's arm, the blood, all of it. The officers watched the whole thing in silence. The officer asked if we had medical records from the hospital visit. Dad showed them the discharge papers. They took photos of everything, including my brother's bandaged arm. Then they asked if we wanted to press charges. Dad said yes without hesitation. The officer said they would need to speak with the family next door. We watched from our window when the officers went to the neighbor's house. A woman answered the door. Even from a distance, we could hear her starting to yell before the officers had even said anything. They talked for a few minutes before the kid appeared behind her, looking significantly less smug than he had that afternoon. The officers brought both of them outside. The woman, who I can only describe as Karen, was screaming at the top of her lungs about how we had no right to destroy her son's property. The officers tried to calm her down, but she just kept getting louder and more aggressive. One of the officers finally had enough. He told her that her son's actions constituted assault with a dangerous object, and that the video evidence clearly showed her son harassing my brother on our property before causing serious injury. He said her son would need to come with them to the station for questioning and that charges would likely be filed. Karen lost it. She started screaming that we were ruining her son's life over an accident. The officers had to physically separate her from her son when they walked him to their patrol car. She was still yelling when they drove away, standing in her driveway and hurling insults at our house. My brother's arm healed over the next few months, but he still has a scar. The kid ended up with charges for assault and had to do community service. His mother tried to sue us for the drone, but the case got thrown out immediately once the judge saw the video. We haven't heard a peep from either of them since. They avoid us completely now, which is fine by me. Our backyard finally feels peaceful again. I just moved into a new apartment building downtown 3 weeks ago, and today was one of those moving days where everything seemed to happen at once. My sister had called me that morning saying she needed to clear out her storage closet, so she was dropping off 3 massive bags of my winter clothes and betting that I've been keeping at her place for months. She'd texted me around 11 a.m. saying she'd leave them in the lobby, but when I got down there at noon, the building manager told me someone had moved them to the elevator area because they were blocking the entrance. Each bag was stuffed to the breaking point with heavy coats, blankets, throw pillows, and who knows what else. I made the mistake of thinking I could carry all 3 at once instead of making 2 trips. My car was parked in the garage, and I figured I could just power through it. So there I was in the elevator lobby, on the ground floor, loaded down like a pack mule. I had 2 bags gripped in my left hand, 1 massive bag clutched under my right arm, and my little terrier mix tucked against my chest with my other arm. He weighed maybe 12 pounds. But when you're already hauling what felt like 50 pounds of fabric, those 12 extra pounds made a difference. My dog kept squirming because he wanted down, but I couldn't put him on the ground and risk him running off while I wrestled with these bags. The glass door leading into the parking garage was one of those heavy commercial ones with a slow, automatic closer. I've been through it plenty of times already during my 3 weeks here, and it always required a good push. With my hands completely full, I had no choice but to lean my shoulder into it and shove it open with my body weight. The door swung open reluctantly, and I shuffled through sideways, trying not to drop anything or squeeze my dog too hard. I was breathing heavily from the effort, and one of the bags was starting to slip from my grip. When I got through and took a few steps forward, I spotted him. A guy in his late 20s or early 30s, maybe 10 feet away, walking toward the door from inside the garage. He had 1 dog with him, some kind of golden retriever on a leash, but otherwise his hands were completely free. He was just strolling along at a leisurely pace, not carrying a single thing except that leash, dangling from one hand. He had earbuds in and seemed to be in no particular hurry. We made eye contact for a split second when I struggled through the doorway. I was concentrating so hard on not dropping my bags that I didn't really register his expression. I kept moving forward, and he kept walking toward me at the same slow pace. The door started swinging shut behind me. He was still a good 7 or 8 feet away when it closed. He reached the door about 3 seconds after it shut and had to push it open himself. That's when he decided to open his mouth. He yanked out one earbud and thanked me sarcastically for holding the door for him. His voice dripped with attitude like I'd personally offended him by not standing there holding a heavy door open while he took his sweet time approaching it. I stopped dead in my tracks about 15 feet past the door now. My bags felt even heavier suddenly. My dog wiggled in my arms and let out a small whine. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard him. There was no way someone just said that to me while I was clearly overloaded with stuff and he had absolutely nothing in his hands. I turned around to face him. I asked him to repeat what he just said. My voice was loud enough that it echoed slightly in the concrete garage. I wanted to give him a chance to backtrack. Maybe he'd realize how ridiculous he sounded and apologize. But no, this guy apparently had zero shame. He said it again, complaining about how I didn't hold the door open for him. He went on about how it's common courtesy to hold doors for people. He doubled down on his complaint, acting like I was the rude one, like he genuinely believed I'd wronged him somehow. He even gestured at his dog, saying he had his hands full too. His hands full with a single leash. My blood pressure shot up instantly. I yelled at him that I was carrying a bunch of stuff. I gestured with the bags without dropping everything, though one bag nearly slipped. My dog let out a little bark, picking up on my frustration. I pointed out that he could clearly see I had 3 huge bags and a dog in my arms. But this guy wasn't done. He kept going, saying that didn't matter and that I should have held it anyway. He muttered something about women these days not having manners. He was actually lecturing me about manners while expecting a woman half his size who was clearly struggling with an armload of heavy bags and a dog to hold a door for his perfectly capable self. He stood there with one hand on his hip, the other holding his dog's leash, looking at me like I owed him an apology. Something snapped in me. I'd had enough of entitled people thinking the world revolved around them. I'd dealt with enough rude neighbors, pushy strangers, and self-absorbed jerks in this city over the years. Not today. I screamed at him, asking what the hell was wrong with him. My voice bounced off the concrete walls and ceiling. A couple of people in the garage turned to look. Then I told him he should learn how to open his own doors and called him Princess. I really emphasized Princess, drawing it out. I added that he was a grown man with 2 free hands and he couldn't manage to open a door by himself. My voice echoed in the garage. The change in him was instant. His confident, entitled expression faltered. Suddenly, his sarcastic tone vanished completely. He mumbled something I couldn't quite hear, barely audible now. Something about me being crazy. His face turned red, and he quickly turned away and headed for the elevator with his dog. He was moving a lot faster than he'd been walking before, practically speed walking. He kept his head down and didn't look back. His dog had to trot to keep up with him. I stood there for a moment, still fuming, watching him disappear into the elevator lobby. My arms were shaking from holding the bags for so long. My dog licked my chin, probably trying to calm me down. I could feel other people in the garage looking at me, but I didn't care. The whole situation was absurd. This was a grown man, easily 6 feet tall, probably 170 pounds at least. He looked like he went to the gym regularly based on his build. Meanwhile, I'm 5'3" on a good day, maybe 115 pounds, soaking wet. I was holding 3 enormous bags that were killing my arms and shoulders, plus trying to manage a squirmy dog. And he had the audacity to complain because I didn't hold a door for him when he was 10 feet away, with completely free hands. He wasn't even close to the door when I went through it. If he'd been right behind me, maybe a foot or 2 away, I would have tried to hold it despite my load. But he was far enough away that the door would have fully closed before he reached it anyway. I would have had to stand there holding it open for a good 5 or 6 seconds while he slowly made his way over. I thought about it when I walked to my car. If the roles had been reversed, If I'd seen him struggling through that door with his arms full of heavy bags, I would have jogged over and held it for him without thinking twice. That's just basic human decency. You help people when they clearly need it. You don't stand there with empty hands and complain when someone who's overloaded doesn't wait on you. But apparently this guy's expectation was that I should have spotted him from across the garage, propped that heavy door open with my body while balancing everything I was carrying, and waited while he leisurely strolled up at his own pace. Like I was supposed to be his personal doorman. Like my struggle didn't matter because he wanted convenience. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Then I started laughing. He clearly expected me to just take his sarcasm and keep walking with my head down. He probably pulled that entitled attitude with people all the time and got away with it because most folks don't want confrontation in a parking garage. Most people would have just ignored him or mumbled an apology to avoid the hassle. Well, not today, princess. Not today. I loaded my bags into my trunk, which took some effort since they were so heavy. I set my dog in the passenger seat and he immediately settled down, happy to be out of my arms. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, letting my arms rest. They were sore and I could see red marks on my palms from where the bag handles had been digging in. I drove off thinking about how some people just expect the world to cater to them without ever stopping to think about what others might be dealing with. I moved into this townhouse complex about 6 months ago because of how peaceful it was. During my walk through, the realtor kept emphasizing the quiet atmosphere, and she wasn't lying. Most residents were older folks who valued their peace and quiet. I'd sometimes see someone watering their plants or checking their mail, and we'd exchange polite nods. That was the extent of our interactions, and honestly, it was perfect for me. I'm not antisocial or anything, but after spending all day dealing with people, coming home to silence felt like a luxury. The unit to my left had an elderly gentleman who I barely saw. The unit to my right had been vacant since I moved in. My place sat right in the middle, giving me this bubble of tranquility I'd grown to love. I had my routines down. I'd get home, make dinner, maybe watch something or read, and be in bed by midnight. The walls were thick enough that I never heard anything from the neighboring units. It was exactly what I needed. That all changed on a Tuesday night. I'd stayed up a bit later than usual, finally crawling into bed around 1 in the morning. I was just drifting off when this thunderous rumbling jolted me awake. At first, I thought maybe there was construction happening outside, but then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across floors, heavy boxes thudding against walls, and voices echoing through the hallway. I checked my phone. 2:15 in the morning. Who moves at 2:15 in the morning? I tried to be understanding. Maybe they had no choice. Maybe this was their only option. But then the real noise started. Every few minutes, their metal screen door would slam shut with this horrible screeching bang that made me wince. Then their main door would slam. Then another bang against the wall we shared. It sounded like they were actively trying to wake up the entire building. I heard footsteps in the hallway and peeked through my peephole. A guy from a few doors down was standing there in his bathrobe, looking thoroughly annoyed. A woman answered the door, and I could hear their conversation clearly through my door. She apologized repeatedly, saying they didn't realize how loud they were being and promised to keep it down. The neighbor told her it was past 2 in the morning and people were trying to sleep. She apologized again, claiming they were almost done with just a few more things left to move. But here's the thing. Her tone didn't match her words. She sounded irritated, like we were the ones being unreasonable for expecting quiet at 2 in the morning. The neighbor went back to his unit, and I heard him say something under his breath. I tried to go back to sleep, but the banging continued for another hour. I laid there staring at my ceiling, telling myself to let it go. Moving is stressful. They probably didn't mean to be so loud. The next morning, I opened my door to head out and immediately noticed something odd. There were these small plastic clothes clips scattered all over the stairs and walkway. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. Broken ones, stepped on ones, creating this trail that led directly to the new neighbor's door. It looked like they dropped an entire basket and couldn't be bothered to clean it up. I stepped carefully around them, noting that they were still there when I got home that evening. I let it slide. Maybe they hadn't noticed. A few days passed relatively peacefully. I'd hear occasional noises from next door. Nothing too terrible. Then one morning I ran into the caretaker who handles the building's maintenance. He was standing by the trash bins looking frustrated. I asked if everything was okay. He explained he was cleaning up someone's mess again and mentioned that people didn't seem to understand we have separate bins for a reason. He was pulling out handfuls of fruit peels, vegetable scraps, and food waste from the non-biodegradable bin. The smell was awful. I didn't want to immediately blame my new neighbors, but given everything else, I had my suspicions. The caretaker had been managing this building for years, and this was the first time I'd seen him deal with this kind of issue. I made it to Friday without any major incidents. I was working from home, catching up on some paperwork, when I heard it. A light tapping sound coming from the wall we shared. Tap, tap, tap. Okay, I thought. They're probably just hanging a picture. No big deal. I can handle a few minutes of tapping, but then the tapping became hammering, and the hammering became relentless pounding that seemed to shake my entire wall. It sounded like they were trying to drill through to my side. My coffee cup rattled on my desk. My windows vibrated. This wasn't hanging a picture frame. This was full-on construction-level noise. I sat there for about 20 minutes waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The pounding continued, sometimes pausing for a minute before starting up again, even louder. I normally keep my music pretty low out of respect for everyone else in the building. I actually bought a decibel meter when I moved in to make sure I wasn't disturbing anyone. I never let my music go above 80 decibels, well below the daytime limit. But there I was listening to this incessant hammering. Something clicked in my mind. Why was I being so considerate of someone who showed absolutely zero consideration for anyone else? They'd woken up the entire floor at 2 in the morning. They'd left trash everywhere. They'd apparently contaminated the recycling bins. And now they were hammering away without even the courtesy of a heads-up note slipped under my door. I walked over to my speaker system and turned it up to 70%. The music helped drown out some of the hammering. But then I thought, why stop there? If they could make all that noise without caring, why should I hold back? I cranked the volume to 90% and selected my loudest playlist. The bass kicked in and I could feel it vibrating through the floor. I'd never pushed my system this far. It was glorious. I couldn't see their faces through the wall, but I could definitely hear when their hammering stopped abruptly. I left it playing for the next 3 hours, enjoying every minute of it. They wanted to test the limits of neighborly patience. Well, now they knew exactly where mine ended. The hammering never resumed that day. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.